In a previous video, I took you behind the scenes of a client call, and this client had been sued over website accessibility. They had entered into a settlement agreement, and they needed help meeting the various terms of that agreement. So, in the video, we covered what the client and I discussed on that call, and that included the services involved, what those services consisted of, and some general estimates that I provided to the client with the asterisk that I had only briefly glanced at the website before we had the call. So, one note from that call that's not in the previous video is that the client provided me a quote that he had been given from another company. And sometimes when you hear these prices that are thrown around in accessibility, it sounds like these projects are so expensive and the companies must be making so much money from these projects. But when you break down the amount of work involved, it's not as much money as you think. So the margins are thinner than you might think. And when when the client told me what he had been quoted, I thought it was on the low side on the call. But again, we hadn't scoped out this project, so I wasn't sure, but that was what I was thinking. But then as we started scoping, it became clear that it was, in fact, on the lower side. And um, we weren't going to be that close to the quote. And so I recently emailed the client and I let him know, look, if you want us to continue with this proposal, we can. But here's what we're finding as we're scoping out your website. And then I listed out all of the services involved that would be a part of this quote. And I told him if they actually provide you all of these services, they've made you a really good offer. And that leads to the graphic that's on the screen currently, and it's titled "The Money Comes from Somewhere." So with accessibility, I have a really good feel for how much each of the services costs and what what lines up in quotes. And when I heard the other quote, I initially thought, I was like, how are they going to be able to do this for this amount? And I thought to myself, well, maybe when we scope, there's something that I don't know where it's easier or there's less work than I think there is. So there are 5 columns on the screen, and the first one is incomplete scope. And what these columns get at is that here are the most likely reasons that the quote was as low as it was. And the first one being incomplete scope. So possibly the company didn't account for all of the content, pages, etc. So maybe they weren't considering everything that was involved with this project. So when they scoped it, they didn't account for, let's say, all of the work that would be needed to make the videos accessible. The second column is inaccurate quote. So maybe they did scope everything, but they didn't accurately assess how long it would take them, and how long it would take the various people providing the services. Also, potentially, they may have missed some content, so they may not have included everything. And this goes right along with incomplete scope, but I wanted to add it anyway because it provides a. I think it's another look at how this might have come about. So this project involved literally hundreds of images, and I don't know because we never, we don't actually count every single all the images. We're just getting a feel for how many there are. But then hundreds of images. There was also PDF remediation involved in this project, and again, dozens of videos. And there is a lot of time that goes into that can go into each of these. And then one other suspicion of mine is that there will be lower quality. So the audit will be watered down. It won't be as good. It won't report on all of the issues. The remediation will be watered down. So maybe remediation doesn't they don't actually fix everything. Maybe they don't help the client work through the third party embeds and integrations. There's so much friction in the remediation aspect of this. And there are so many things that can be can be on the horizon and yet difficult to know they exist. So you can have an idea on what might exist, but specific to the project, you might not know what's going to come up, and that can add time to the project too. And then the fifth column I have here is taking a loss or not making any money. And then with the hope that maybe if there's a subscription involved, then they are recouping the money on the second year, or maybe there are additional upsells or services along the way that that the company can make money from. But as it stands, I just didn't see for the price that was quoted how it would be worth it. And when you start to look at the numbers and you start to extract all of the services involved, and then also account for the unknowns. So as I was talking about, like especially with third party integrations, okay, how much work is going to be involved here? Is the client reliant upon like heavily reliant upon this third party integration or embed, or are they going to be resistant to removing it? Because full conformance is the requirement here. And as if you're taking on remediation, then you need to have that in mind and know that you're going to have to work through all of the accessibility issues. So the money has to come from somewhere, and our quotes are very competitive. And when someone is able to easily beat our quote, then this is what it makes me think of. It makes me wonder, okay, what's happening here? Because there's all this work that's involved, and there's all this time, and then there's the unknown, and it's like how is this other company making money on this project, or are they making money on this project? So that's this recently happened, and I wanted to discuss this because it does come up, and it is something where I don't know any one of these things. Maybe they will, the client will get an excellent quality project, and the company really it's a strategic move where they're taking a loss and hoping to make money on the back end. I don't know, right? But if they were going to genuinely provide all of these services and do them the correct way, then it was a really low quote that they gave the client. And one other note I wanted to make, and I can't remember it now, but yeah, I can't remember that. There was another point I just thought of, but uh, this is what to consider as you're getting quotes from various vendors. If one is extremely low, then you have to ask yourself, well, where is the money coming from? Because it costs money to get this done the right way, and then also to have this actually completed, not just breeze through this, not just get a B minus. We want the A plus grade. And what happens, and you can't see this, but what happens in the marketplace is there's a gradient. There are degrees of services, and sometimes the services are on the higher side, and sometimes they're in the middle, and then sometimes they fall towards the lower side. So just think about, this might be an F. You might be getting a C plus or a B plus or an A plus. You want to be on the higher end of that gradient, or that higher end of that continuum. So if you're not, then you're not getting really what you bargained for in the transaction. But sometimes you do come across these quotes, and by the way, sometimes you'll receive higher quotes and you still won't be getting that higher grade of service. But I think that's what's going to happen is sometimes when you see these lower quotes is there's a compromise somewhere, because again, the money has to come from somewhere. So there has to be someone is paying for this along the way, and it might be the company, but it's in most cases I don't think it will be. I think it will be the client, and the client will end up not getting some of the service that they bargained for, and they won't know it because most clients and most people, they don't understand digital accessibility. They can't assess whether or not they're getting back the complete bargain that the complete value that they bargained for. So I think that's what will happen. But this quote was very low, and I told the client that there's the implicit qualification that if they are providing all of these services. And if they're, I didn't say genuinely doing it, but if they're genuinely, I don't know what I wrote. I can't remember what I wrote, but I said something like, if they're really providing all of these services, then that's a really good offer. And it was a really good offer. Maybe they were taking a loss. Maybe they just, when they were creating their proposal, they didn't scope properly. I don't know what the case is, but I think it will be really hard for that company to make any money off of that project. But this is something that came up recently. If you need help with accessibility, I will include a link to accessible.org and our pricing in the description. Also, if you'd like to talk with me directly, I will include a link to contact me. Those links will all be in the description.